When the lawyer called my name that morning, my hands were trembling so badly that the pen slipped from my grip. I thought he was going to confirm what my late father had promised me all my life, the house on 6th Avenue, the one with the mango tree that shaded my childhood summers. Instead, he said 5 words that knocked the breath out of me. The title is no longer yours. I remember the faint hum of the ceiling fan, the way the paper on his desk fluttered with each rotation. I remember the smell of old wood polish, sharp and heavy, and how every sound, the scrape of his chair, the whisper of pages turning, felt unbearably loud against the silence growing inside me. The title has been transferred, he repeated, clearing his throat. Legally. To your husband's family. My vision blurred. The lawyer's mouth kept moving, explaining procedures and signatures and approvals, but I couldn't hear anything beyond a single echo. My father's house is gone before all this, before the signatures and the silence. My life was simple. My name is Amira, 35, married to Saad for 9 years. We lived in a small portion of my father's property, a quiet house with a veranda that overlooked the same street I'd learned to ride my bicycle on. After my father passed, I used to sit there every evening with a cup of tea, watching the neighborhood children play where I once had. It made me feel close to him. Saad worked as an accountant for his uncle's company. He wasn't rich, but we were comfortable. My mother-in-law, Shahnaz Begum, lived a few blocks away. She visited often, sometimes too often, carrying baskets of fruit, commenting on my curtains, and reminding me how fortunate I was to have married her only son. I tried to be patient. My father had always said, "Respect your elders, even when they test your peace." Still, there was always something in Shahnaz's tone, a quiet condescension, a subtle competition I could never understand. She'd often say things like, "This house feels wasted on just the 2 of you," or, "Your father was generous, maybe too generous." I'd laugh it off, not realizing then that those were warnings, not words. After my father's passing, his lawyer read out the will. He had left the family home to me, the only child, while setting aside a modest amount for charity. Everyone seemed content with that, including Saad. At least that's what I thought. For a year, life carried on gently. I planted marigolds along the driveway, turned father's study into a reading room, and even started tutoring children in the evenings. There was laughter in the house again. But Shahnaz never stopped reminding me of how a house belongs to the man of the family. She'd say it while slicing fruit in my kitchen or watching TV beside me, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. "You know, Beta," she'd sigh, "women's names on property only cause family problems later. It's better when men handle these things." I'd smile politely and change the subject. I didn't know that Saad was already beginning to listen. The first clue/suspicion begins. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday afternoon, 8 months after the will. A property agent came by, saying he was there to confirm boundary measurements. He had papers with my husband's name on them. I told him there must be some mistake, the house was mine. He apologized, said perhaps Saad had requested an update for insurance purposes, and left. That night I asked Saad casually over dinner, "Did you talk to someone about the property today?" He looked up, confused for a moment, then shrugged. "Oh, maybe someone from the insurance office called. I just gave them directions." Why? I wanted to believe him. I'd never had reason not to. But something shifted after that day. He started locking his phone. He stayed longer at work, often coming home past midnight, smelling faintly of cigarette smoke, something he hadn't touched in years. When I asked, he said, "Just stress from work." And then, his mother began visiting more frequently, unannounced, always when he was home. I'd find them whispering in the living room, their voices low until I entered. One evening, I overheard her say, "You're doing the right thing, Beta. Once it's in your name, no one can take it from you." When I stepped in, both of them fell silent. Shahnaz smiled tightly, as if she hadn't just drawn a knife across my piece. I remember that moment vividly, the hum of the refrigerator, the flickering light above the dining table, the dry taste in my mouth as I forced a smile and asked if anyone wanted tea. Inside, my chest tightened with something I couldn't name yet. The next morning, I went to the study, my father's old room. His photograph sat on the desk beside the brass lamp he loved. I touched the frame and whispered, "Abu, please don't let them touch your home." That was the first time I prayed not for happiness but for protection. and somewhere deep down I already knew something was being stolen. A few days after that uneasy conversation, Saad started keeping the house documents locked away in his desk. It wasn't like him. He'd always been careless with papers, receipts piled on the dining table, folders under the bed. But now the drawer in his study was always locked. When I asked for the spare key to file some bills, he said gently, "I'll take care of it later." He kissed my forehead like he was comforting a child. That small gesture, once sweet, felt suddenly like a curtain closing between us. Weeks passed. Life became a pattern of silences. He spoke less, smiled less. When his phone buzzed, he'd leave the room to answer it. Once I caught a glimpse of a message on his screen before he turned it away. It read, "Did you manage to get her to sign?" He claimed it was from his office, something about a client form. But that night, while he slept, I opened the drawer I'd been eyeing for weeks. The lock wasn't strong. My father had always said, "No secret in a home stays hidden forever." Inside were several documents, property forms, bank papers, and one letter stamped by the land registrar's office. It said, "Transfer of ownership from Ms. Amira Rahman to Mr. Saad Ahmed as joint custodian under marital clause." I remember reading those words 3 times, not believing what I saw. My name had been used. My signature forged. The date on the paper made my stomach twist. It was the same day I'd been in bed with a fever. The day Saad had brought me soup and said, "Don't worry about anything." I pressed my hand to my mouth, the paper shaking between my fingers. The air in the room felt heavy, almost too thick to breathe. And then came the sound, a quiet click. The door behind me opened. Saad stood there, holding a cup of water, his expression frozen mid-step. The confrontation. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the papers. I simply asked in a voice that didn't sound like mine, "What is this?" He set the cup down and tried to smile. "Nothing serious, Amira. Just paperwork for security. You know, legal formality." Formality? I held up the papers. "You forged my signature." He exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "My mother said." "Your mother?" My voice cracked. "What does she have to do with my father's house?" He sat down on the edge of the bed, avoiding my eyes. "She was just worried. You know how she is. She said if anything happened to you, the property should stay within the family." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was too absurd, too cruel. "She's not my family, Saad. She's yours. My father worked his entire life for this house. He left it to me. You had no right." He looked up, guilt flickering in his eyes. "You have to understand, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted peace in the family. Amy said it's best for everyone." "Everyone except me," I interrupted. Silence. A long, suffocating silence. That night, I slept in my father's study. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stand to lie beside a man who had turned my trust into a contract. The betrayal revealed. The next morning, Shanaz arrived, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Assalamu alaikum, beta," she greeted, her voice syrupy. "I brought parathas for breakfast." I said nothing. She set the tray down, adjusted her dupatta, and looked around the house like she was already picturing it as hers. Finally, I said, "You must be happy. Your plan worked." She blinked, feigning innocence. "Plan? What plan, dear?" I handed her the document. She scanned it, pretending surprise. "Oh, Saad didn't tell you? It's just a technical correction. The property was in your father's name and you're married now, so naturally it goes to your husband's side." "My father left it to me," I said, my voice trembling. "Not to Saad. Not to you." She smiled, a thin, pitying smile that made my blood run cold. "Beta, property doesn't suit women. You'll understand one day." Something broke inside me at those words. For years I had endured her remarks, small, cutting, disguised as concern. But this was theft dressed as tradition. I went to the lawyer that same day. He confirmed what I already feared. The title had been transferred using a power of attorney letter I supposedly signed. "It can be challenged," he said, adjusting his glasses. "But it won't be easy. They'll claim consent." I stared at the desk, my father's voice echoing in my head. "Protect what's yours, Amira. Not out of greed, but out of respect for what I built." So I fought. The action begins. I gathered every document, My father's will, the death certificate, the old title deed. Then I went home and confronted Saad again. I'm reopening the case, I said, placing the folder in front of him. Either you come clean or we both face this in court. He paled. You'll destroy the family. No, I said quietly. Your mother already did. That night he didn't come home. 2 days later, his uncle called me, asking why I was making trouble. He said, be a good wife. Let the elders handle property. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore, from determination. The following week I filed a complaint. Shanaz and Saad were summoned for questioning. I'll never forget the way she looked at me outside the registrar's office. Not ashamed, not guilty, but offended. You've humiliated us, Amira, she hissed. You'll regret this. I met her gaze and said, not as much as I regret trusting you. That night, alone in the house, I stood by the mango tree my father planted. The leaves rustled softly in the breeze. And I whispered to the dark, I won't let them erase your name. For the first time since his death, I felt him near, not in grief but in strength. It's strange how silence can become its own kind of noise. After filing the complaint, the house grew unbearably quiet. Not peaceful but heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Neighbors whispered when they saw me on the porch. My students' parents, once friendly, avoided eye contact. Even my relatives began calling less. No one wanted to choose sides between a woman and her husband's family. But I had already chosen mine. The price of standing alone. The first week after the filing, Saad didn't return home. His clothes still hung in our closet, his slippers still by the door, ghosts of a life that no longer fit. Every night, I sat in my father's old chair, reading through legal papers under the dim light of that brass lamp. The smell of dust and old ink filled the air. Sometimes I'd pause and whisper, am I doing the right thing? The lawyer's voice echoed in my memory. You'll face pressure, maybe even threats. But truth doesn't fade. He was right. Shanaz began her campaign, visiting neighbors, spinning her version of the story. She's ungrateful. I overheard her tell Mrs. Rahim one morning through the open window. My son gave her everything. She's poisoning him against his own blood. That word poison cut deep. I wanted to shout that it was she who'd poisoned our marriage, our peace, our name. But I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. The investigation. A few weeks later, the land office called me in for verification. The clerk, a weary-looking man with ink-stained fingers, asked gently, Madam, did you sign this document? I looked at the paper in front of me. My name written in loops too perfect, too even. Not my handwriting. No, I said firmly. He nodded. We suspected as much. The notary seal was fake too. Whoever did this used influence. My stomach twisted. Influence, that meant money, power, connections. Things I didn't have. Still, I left that office with something stronger. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that what they did was real. The family backlash. That evening, I received a call from Saad. His voice was cold, detached. Why are you doing this, Amira? You're embarrassing us. Us. I repeated softly. You stopped being us the day you signed my name. He sighed. You're letting outsiders come between us. My mother. Your mother, I interrupted, sold my father's legacy. And you helped her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, in a voice so small I almost missed it, he said, she said it would make things easier. That women shouldn't carry this burden. I felt my heart tighten. And you believed her? He didn't answer. The line went dead. That was the last time we spoke as husband and wife. The day of the hearing. The first hearing was held in a small, crowded courtroom. I wore my father's old wristwatch. It didn't work anymore, but it gave me courage. Shanaz sat across from me, her head held high, wrapped in a silk dupatta the color of triumph. Saad was beside her, eyes downcast. When the registrar asked about the forged signature, she said smoothly, it was a misunderstanding. My daughter-in-law agreed but forgot. She has poor memory. The audience murmured. I could feel the heat rising up my neck, but I forced my voice to stay calm. Sir, I said, my father's property was his life's work. I would never give it away, especially not to someone who once said women don't deserve ownership. The registrar looked between us. Do you have evidence? I slid forward the notary report, the one confirming the fake seal, and the original will. The clerk beside him nodded. Verification matches. The signature on the transfer is indeed forged. For the first time that day, Shanaz's face faltered. She tried to recover, leaning toward the official. But she's lying. My son. The registrar raised a hand. Please, madam. Let the documents speak. And they did. The fall. The next morning, our street buzzed with whispers. People who once pitied me now avoided her. I heard one shopkeeper say, she tried to cheat her own daughter-in-law. Shameful. Within weeks, her social circle began to shrink. She stopped coming to the market. Her phone calls to Saad became frantic. I knew because he started forwarding them to my lawyer. He had quietly withdrawn from the case, leaving her to defend alone. Perhaps guilt had finally found him. The confrontation, mother-in-law and me. It was a rainy afternoon when she appeared at my gate. Her dupatta was soaked, her face pale. I should have turned her away, but something in her eyes, not arrogance this time but exhaustion, made me open the door. Come in, I said softly. She stepped inside, dripping water onto the floor. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain filled the silence, steady and relentless. Then she said, almost in a whisper, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I looked at her, this woman who had stolen my peace, my home and my trust, and I saw for the first time fear behind her pride. Why, Amy? I asked quietly. What did I ever do to you? She lowered herself onto the chair, her fingers trembling. You have to understand, when I married off my son, I lost everything. The house, the control, the respect. People only listen to those who own things. I thought, if the property came to our name, I'd matter again. Her words struck me like a blade made of pity. All this, the lies, the forgery, the humiliation for control, for the illusion of importance. I would have shared everything with you, I said, tears burning behind my eyes. All you had to do was ask. She looked down. I didn't believe you would. We sat there for a long time, two women separated by pride and pain, listening to the rain hitting the roof. When she finally left, I didn't feel victory, only a strange, hollow quiet. The consequence. A month later, the judgment came. The transfer was void. The title returned to my name. The court reprimanded Saad and Shanaz for fraud but, at my request, issued no prison sentence. When the judge asked why, I said simply, because justice isn't revenge. It's truth restored. The courtroom went silent. In that silence, I felt my father's hand on my shoulder, or maybe it was only memory. That night, I walked through the house barefoot. Every creak of the floorboards, every framed photo on the wall, felt alive again. I whispered to the empty rooms, we're home now, Abu. But home didn't feel the same anymore. It felt quieter, wiser. It took time, months maybe more, for the sound of my own name to stop trembling when people said it. At first, even small things reminded me of the fight. The stamp of official papers, the smell of old files, the echo of courtroom footsteps. But time, I learned, is the gentlest kind of revenge. It doesn't shout. It simply keeps moving, and in that movement it erases what never deserved to stay. The quiet after the storm. I returned to teaching. My students, bright, noisy, and endlessly curious, didn't know the details of what happened. But children have a strange way of sensing pain. One morning, a little girl brought me a flower, a marigold she'd plucked from her garden. For you, miss, she said. Because you always look like you're remembering something. I smiled. Maybe I am. In that moment, I realized healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering differently. My husband's absence. Saad moved away to another city. He called once months later. His voice was softer, almost unsure. I heard the case ended, he said. Yes, I replied. He hesitated. You won. No, I said quietly. I just stopped losing. He sighed. Amy isn't well. She asks about you. I closed my eyes, feeling a complicated ache bloom inside. Tell her, I said slowly, that I hope she finds peace. We didn't speak after that. Some people are not meant to return to your life, only to remain in the lesson it left behind. The home I reclaimed. I kept the house, not for pride but for memory. I repaired the cracks in the walls myself, painted over the stains of the past. I turned the front room into a small library, filled with my father's books and my students' essays. The scent of paper, the rustle of pages, it felt like breathing again. Sometimes I'd sit by the window at dusk, watch the sun melt behind the old guava tree and whisper, "We made it, Abu." The air would stay still as if listening. And in that stillness I'd feel peace. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to live with. The visit. Almost a year later, a car stopped outside the gate. It was Saad. Alone. He looked thinner, older. The weight of guilt had carved his face deeper than time could. "I came to say sorry," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I know," I replied gently. He took a step closer. "You have every right to hate me." "I don't," I said. "Because hate would mean I'm still waiting for something from you." He swallowed hard. "Amy, she doesn't sleep. She keeps saying she hears your father's voice. Maybe it's her conscience." I nodded. "Maybe." He looked around the courtyard. The plants blooming again, the faint laughter of my students echoing from the street. "You made it beautiful," he said softly. "I made it honest," I corrected. He smiled faintly, nodded once, and left. I watched his car disappear down the lane, the dust rising behind him like the last trace of what once was. The lesson. In the quiet years that followed, I learned that betrayal doesn't always destroy you. Sometimes, it chisels you into someone new. Someone braver. Someone who knows the weight of silence and the power of truth. I also learned that forgiveness isn't about setting others free. It's about unclenching your own heart so you can breathe again. Every now and then, I visit my father's grave. I bring a single jasmine flower and whisper the same line. "I kept your promise, Abu. No one can sell what you gave me, not anymore." The wind always seems to answer. And that is how I lost everything that wasn't real to find what was. My home, my name, my peace, they were never in the papers or the property titles. They were always in the choices I made when no one was watching. You see, betrayal changes people. It hardens some. It humbles others. But if you're patient, it can also refine you, like fire refines gold. So tell me, my friends, if someone took what was rightfully yours, not just money or land but respect, would you fight back? Or would you walk away to keep your peace? Let me know what you'd have done, because sometimes the hardest battles are the quiet ones. And remember, this was my story. Maybe in some way it's yours too.